Britain was a nation profoundly mistrustful of what they regarded as a Prussian concept of vast standing armies. But Britain had mobilised in a way she'd not done previously. And during the voluntary period, it would have been hard to make a case that there was or could be any inherent quality of unfairness or partiality in how men went into the army. They volunteered for it. But once the state determined that men should go and established the conditions under which they went, the resentment cap was out of the bag. Any perception of unfairness, any example of partiality that could be sustained, undermined the moral foundations upon which the terrible war was being prosecuted. And I'd suggest that the tribunals were aware of this from the start of their work. That doesn't mean to say, of course, that the judgments were always sound, much less righteous. Like anyone else, their work suffered if they had a bad day or even a bad breakfast. They made honest mistakes, they made crass mistakes, and they sometimes did good turns for people they knew. Not as often as I believe as gossip and hearsay suggest. But, for example, Northampton Appeals Tribunalist Baron Annerley kept his valet chauffeur because he was often obliged to go to Westminster to vote, and he was too infirm to do it unaided. He couldn't just jump onto the bus or the train or whatever. He needed his valet. That was the argument. But when they considered the case, the tribunal didn't suggest that the man might be replaced by an older substitute, and that was normally the way things worked. Annerley was also the master of the local hunt, the Pytchley, whose second whip, George Perce, was appealed for by Lady Lowther, and she obtained a 3-month renewal of his exemption, though it's hard to see what national importance attached to his work. On the other hand, you can consider the example of 4 tribunalists from Northampton Rural Tribunal, who resigned their post during 1918 and thereby opened themselves to the risk of conscription when the Second Military Service Act of that year raised the qualifying recruitment age to 51. Though asked to reconsider, they said that they could not in conscience send men of their own age into uniform while they sat safely at home. Businessmen who came before the tribunals usually received an incremental degree of consideration, though they were by no means always successful in obtaining an exemption. This might well have reflected the fact that men of business often judged their cases, but equally, it's the case that tribunals considered long and hard the effect of their removal upon their local economies. At times, particularly during perceived shortages or distribution crises, a tribunal would dig in its heels and refuse to send men, even one more man in a certain trade, to the front, whatever government was saying. With certain areas of the food industry, bakers being a good example here, the tribunals consistently failed to respond to government's urging that they summon all the localities' men in that business and prompt a rationalisation upon the production and distribution that would allow a certain proportion of the men to go into the army whilst maintaining that food production and distribution level in the area. Again, they were extremely sensitive to the public's sensitivities.